The heavy rains that swept across Central Europe in the past week are now gathering over southern Germany, causing widespread disruption. The police and emergency services have been evacuating residents in the town of Grimma on the Austrian-German border. The entire city of Passau now sits under several feet of water. But in Prague, there is hope that the worst is over. Arise News' Harry Alsop reports.
River levels in the Czech capital Prague rose sharply overnight after the government was forced to open dams further upstream. Soldiers erected flood barriers and piled up sandbags to keep the city's historic centre from being overwhelmed by the water. But in Prague at least, the worst appears to be over. The Vltava reached its peak early this morning, and despite large swathes of the city being underwater, the floods appear to be receding. The rains have moved instead to Germany, where transport and industry has been severely affected by the flooding. Parts of Germany's famous autobahn network have been overrun, making transport almost impossible. In the historic town of Passau, crowds gathered at a viewpoint to see the town submerged in the highest water since the 16th century. Nearly all of the city's streets are underwater, with rescue workers making their way through the town by motorboat. Further north, the Zwickau-Mulde River burst its banks, flooding the nearby town of Grimma. But police have been planning for this moment for over a decade.
Aber insgesamt, glaube ich, kann man sagen, man hat gelernt aus 2002.
Overall, I think we can say we've learnt from 2002. There are many consequences from then that affect today, of a technical kind in terms of training, but also thinking about rethinking scenarios. So everything is fitting together really well, and I think there is some hope and optimism. But of course a lot now depends on the weather forecast, not only the weather forecast, but actual development of the weather.
The 2002 floods killed 17 people and caused €20 billion worth of damage. There are fears the cleanup costs this time may exceed that figure. But today, Brussels vowed to provide EU funding to aid recovery efforts, and Angela Merkel has pledged €100 million for Germany's cleanup. For now, the priority is to keep the waters from flowing into more homes and businesses, and to keep people safe. The cost of the damage will take weeks to assess, and some of the personal implications could be felt for years. Harry Alsop, Arise News.
Journalist Jonathan Crane joins us now from Prague. What's the latest on the floods right now?
Yes, well, I think we're starting to calm down a bit really here. Obviously, we had the worst of the rainfall over the weekend. The river Vltava has reached its peak now. It reached its peak earlier this morning. So the focus now in Prague really is turning to the cleanup operation and obviously repairing a lot of damage that has been sustained by the floods. Also, the authorities are looking further north into the industrial part of the country. That's where the biggest danger lies now in towns like Ústí nad Labem, where they're expecting more flooding. The water level there is expected to reach 11.5 meters, which is just a bit under what it reached more than a decade ago when the country witnessed its last serious flooding. So I think that's where the authorities now will be most concerned about.
What is the latest on the number of casualties?
The latest I'm hearing is 8 confirmed dead. The latest of those was a man who was found dead in a stream in East Bohemia. But it's not just the water, actually, that's been responsible for killing people. One lady was out walking her dog in a park in Prague and was actually killed by a falling tree. Now, obviously, the roots of the tree were weakened by the flooded and waterlogged grass. So the authorities in Prague have actually closed off 29 of the city's parks because they are very concerned about the dangers that they obviously can't do anything to control. They're trying to cut back some of the trees, but obviously weather is unpredictable, so it's very difficult for them to protect people.
When the waters were at their highest, how scary was it for you?
To be honest, in Prague, especially where I live in Prague, I'm on higher ground, it wasn't so bad. Even the rainfall didn't seem like it was that heavy. As you got closer to the old town near the river, you could visibly see the river was higher than usual. Obviously, a lot of people, though, were coming out and having a look at the river. More curiosity, really, than fear. Like I said, the country had severe flooding in 2002, so people were, in some senses, prepared. They could compare it to back then. And generally, I think the sense was one of maybe cautiousness rather than fear.
Now, you talk about the big cleanup operation that is going on. This can't be very good for the tourist season, which must be just getting into swing right now.
Yes, it's been quite interesting, actually. I mean, I've certainly seen a lot of tourists who are taking to the riverbanks, taking photos of the river and the level. It's quite a sight. Obviously, the famous Charles Bridge, which has also been closed off to pedestrians. The water level is very high when you compare to Charles Bridge. So I think it's going to make for some interesting photographs. We've also had emails come into our newspaper from people who are planning to visit Prague asking us, should we still come? Should we cancel our flights? But generally, from the hotels we've spoken to, there hasn't been too much impact. I think they've had a few cancellations. One hotel told us 40% of bookings have been cancelled. But generally, it's not really keeping people away. And I think for them, it's something a bit different and a bit exciting. Obviously, in some parts of the country, there have been problems. People in Prague, also in some of the lower-lying areas of Prague, or those most likely to be flooded, have been evacuated. And unfortunately, we have seen the loss of life. But generally, nowhere near as many problems as the floods 11 years ago.
What about the floods' effects on industry and the economy?
Again, obviously there will be some impact, but analysts are saying that in terms of the effect it will have on the gross domestic product and how it will affect the country's budget deficit, not too bad, to be honest. Obviously, transport here has shut down. That's slowly getting back to normal, so that will have some effect on people getting to work. You mentioned tourism already. In the south of the country, there's a lot of farming, so agriculture will also be hit, but initial estimates suggest that it's not going to have too severe an impact on that.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.